Okay, so we want to continue this conversation about manifest destiny, but move it through Texas and how Texas is going to be ultimately admitted as a state, and then the also the Mexican-American War. So a couple of conflicts sort of embedded in this would be the Texas Revolution, which is the Alamo, etc., and then the Mexican-American War, where Texas will actually um, become part of the United States. It's a little more nuanced than just that, but that's where we're headed. In 1822, the first American settlement will be established in Texas by a man named Stephen Austin, whose name you may recognize. Think about Austin, Texas. Um, Texas is very much a frontier. It's a frontier for Americans, right? This idea of an unsettled West. But it is also part of the frontier for Mexicans. Mexico controls Texas, right? Texas is a Mexican territory. However, it's very far away from power centers in Mexico. And so the people who live in Texas, although part of Mexico, also very much consider themselves to be frontiersmen. And these ideals of individualism and independence are often shared by the Americans who will ultimately move into Texas and the Mexicans who had already been living there. So that's something to keep in mind. Around 1824, Mexico is going to start offering land to Americans for very, very cheap, and they don't have to pay taxes for 4 years. Come in, settle, and work this land. Make this frontier, which had sometimes been neglected, profitable for Mexico. Come on in. And a lot of Americans take advantage of that. And they establish cotton plantations in Texas, which means they're bringing their slaves with them. There are a lot of them are settling from the South, including Tennessee, which will be important in a minute. But so many Americans flood in, and there are so many conflicts between the Mexican frontiersmen and the American frontiersmen that by 1830, Mexico is actively looking for solutions to stop American settlement, right? General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna will also come to power in the 1830s, and he is going to really strive to put a stop to this settlement. By 1835, we have actual fighting, and by 1836, Americans declare that Texas is independent. Not that Texas is part of the United States, although many American settlers want to apply for statehood, but that it is independent from Mexico. Santa Anna and the Mexican army, in response to this, will move very quickly and defeat Americans at the Alamo. That is, a very violent confrontation that involves this very famous Tennessean, whose well-known quote is, "You may all go to hell. I will go to Texas." This is Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett is a politician from East Tennessee who strongly dislikes Andrew Jackson and Andrew Jackson's policies, specifically the Indian Removal Act. And he decided that if Martin Van Buren became president after Jackson, sort of the hand-picked successor, that he would move to Texas, and that happens, right? He loses a couple of elections in Tennessee. He becomes very angry at the politics that he sees, and so he leaves. And he also says, "I am at liberty to vote as my conscience and judgment dictates to be right, without the yoke of any party on me. Look at my arms, you will find no party handcuff on them." So he was going to go out there and establish a plot of land and establish the independence of Texas, or help with that at least, and then bring his family with him. They were going to sort of get out of there. But of course, we know that he is likely executed at the Alamo. And this is just a short little video that walks us through some of the events of the Alamo. All right, so we know that the Americans are defeated at the Alamo, but as that video also tells us, there are going to be sort of further conflicts between Texas and Mexico. So Sam Houston, who is also a Tennessean, lots of involvement here between Tennessee and Texas. Sam Houston, Houston High School, rallies American forces. He will defeat the Mexican army, and Santa Anna will be taken prisoner and forced to sign a peace treaty, essentially declaring that Texas is independent and that the Mexicans have no claim to Texas. Now, this is a treaty that's going to be signed while Santa Anna is prisoner, and so Mexico will see this as not a valid document. They won't acknowledge it. So, as far as Mexico is concerned at this time, Texas is still part of Mexico. In 1836, Sam Houston and Texas will ask to be admitted to the Union, but there are still concerns over adding a new slave state, so it will not formally join until the very end of 1845, beginning of 1846. So, will Texas become a state? Yes, but not quite yet. We've got a few more conflicts to get through and a new president to come to office. So the election of 1844 is going to see Henry Clay of the Whig Party versus James K. Polk, a Democrat also from Tennessee, and a protege of Andrew Jackson, so a Jacksonian Democrat. And he is going to run on the idea of American expansion. And so while Henry Clay doesn't take a super strong position during the war, remember that Henry Clay has also expressed concerns about adding new territory to the United States because of this idea of slavery compromises. Polk wants Texas or Oregon or all or more. He wants as much territory as possible. Polk is going to win, and in response to his victory, Tyler feels like he has a mandate to admit Texas to the Union, which he will do at the very, very, very tail end of 1845. In terms of Polk and Oregon, there will be a compromise about the Oregon boundary line. Part of what Polk's slogan had been, this is how the votes break down, but part of what Polk's slogan had been was 54-40 or fight in terms of the Oregon boundary line. But Polk does get that territory. There will also be, during the Polk presidency, fallout with Mexico over the admission of Texas, and also boundary questions about where the boundary between Texas and the United States should be with Mexico. Polk also, remember, wants to gain the New Mexico and California territories, and this is significant because Texas is a very important stepping stone to acquiring those territories. So this is why I said we really want to think about James K. Polk when we think about Manifest Destiny. General Zachary Taylor, again, a future president, is going to be sent to Texas. And notice Andrew Jackson is going to come to sort of national prominence with his leadership as a commander in the War of 1812 at the Battle of New Orleans. And Zachary Taylor is going to come to similar prominence here in his involvement in the Mexican War. Taylor is going to be sent to Texas, and they will start doing things like secret seizures of ports, like sending messages to the frontiersmen in New Mexico and California saying that they will support them. And remember, New Mexico and California are still, again, Mexican territories. Polk will also send a diplomat to Mexico to attempt to buy the land from Mexico, but there's no deal. And so in response to this sort of frustration that Polk has at not being able to acquire this territory, he is going to send Taylor and his troops down to this border at the Rio Grande, and it's considered to be a provocation. So Mexico will attack American troops, but it's very confusing and really up for debate in terms of what actually happened. Did Taylor stage the attack at Polk's request? Or did Mexico just get so angry that the Americans had sent troops down to this disputed border that they then attack American troops? Because there's a dispute, remember on the last slide, of where the border is, which river should the border be at. So regardless, war happens, fighting breaks out. And the ultimate end of this is going to be what Polk wanted, the gaining of Texas, which will, in the end, make the Mexican-American War a success in the eyes of the American people. But at the time, it's somewhat unpopular because there are a lot of casualties. There's this feeling that Polk sort of picked a fight where he didn't need to. And there's some frustration there. There's another important general who, again, we've talked about before, Winfield Scott, who will make a really big difference. And in the end, we have, in 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, where Mexico is going to cede California and New Mexico and also acknowledge the border with Mexico at the Rio Grande. The United States will take on some debts of Mexico in regards to the Texas territory, and also pay Mexico $15 million. And so this is going to be the Texas annexation and also the Mexican cession territory here. You can also refer to that map that I had up during our conversation on Manifest Destiny. I'm going to play you a Jimmy Fallon clip because I feel very strongly that when you can play funny history clips, you should. So we'll finish out our conversation of the Mexican-American War with this.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Coming up this week, we have Russell Brand, Tracy Morgan, Michael Stipe, Emily Blunt. It's going to be a great week. So excited. It's week 2.
Hey, Jimmy. Hey, great show so far, but why haven't you done any jokes about the Gadsden Purchase?
I'm sorry, what?
The Gadsden Purchase, signed in 1854 by President Franklin Pierce, granted the U.S. sovereignty over the southern tips of Arizona and New Mexico. You see, the terrain in the southernmost portion of the Mexican cession, 1848, was too rocky for the transcontinental railroad. So,
wait, you brought a visual aid. That's you carry that around everywhere you go, or?
I do love the Gadsden Purchase.
Well, if you love this thing so much, why would you want me to make a joke about it?
I mean, you got to be able to laugh at the Gadsden Purchase. I mean, it's what life's all about.
Life is all about laughing at the Gadsden. Maybe that's what your life's about, but I don't see what's so funny about a 150-year-old land treaty.
Well, I mean, just look at all the comedic possibilities. I mean, you got Franklin Pierce, hello, James Gadsden, not to mention topographical issues regarding the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. I mean, the jokes practically write themselves.
Yeah, I don't think that's true.
You know what? I just thought of a joke. Do you guys want to hear it? What's the only difference between the Gadsden Purchase and the Louisiana Purchase?
I give up. What?
The Louisiana Purchase was signed in 1803 and gave the U.S. 800,000 square miles of French territory, and the Gadsden Purchase didn't suck.
Oh, that's a pretty great joke. Except he forgot the part about how the Gadsden Purchase never would have happened if it weren't for the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Up top, baby.
I'm sorry. Who are you?
I'm that guy's worst nightmare. The guy who loves the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Signed 1848. Ended the Mexican-American War.
Wait, you have the actual treaty with you?
No, but it's a pretty decent replica.
Okay, that is just sad. That's really sad. What do you think about all this?
The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is nothing more than a poor man's Clayton Bulwer Treaty.
You got me there, buddy.
That's awful cute, beard boy. Now I got a joke for you. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
best treaty in the world.
All right, I think I see where this is going. The best treaty in the world, who?
What, are you stupid? The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Who wants to party?
Hey, just curious, though, what do you guys think of the Webster-Ashburton Treaty?
You mean the 1842 treaty that resolved minor boundary disputes between U.S. and Canada?
Yes, negotiated by U.S. Secretary of State Daniel Webster.
I love the Webster-Ashburton Treaty.
Me too. Dad?
Okay, so we will be talking about the Gadsden Purchase. We've already talked about a couple of those other treaties that were mentioned there in that little bit. So next up is sectionalism. Stay tuned.